called, who, and how long the trial lasts, still hotly contested.
And there was a taste of the battles that lie ahead in the Senate earlier today.
Over the last 12 weeks, House Democrats have conducted the most rushed, least thorough, and most unfair impeachment inquiry in modern history.
Leader McConnell's 30-minute partisan stem winder contained hardly a single defense of the President of the United States on the merits. Almost none defended President Trump because they can't.
This afternoon in the Oval Office, a consolation prize, a Democratic congressman who's switching sides. Donald Trump, though, still angry.
Well, I don't feel like I'm being impeached because it's a hoax. It's a setup. It's a horrible thing they did.
The impeachment articles have to be handed to the Senate, but the Democratic Speaker is refusing to do so until she receives assurances about how the trial will be conducted. The partisan gridlock continues. John Sopel, BBC News, Washington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Impeaching a president of the United States. This isn't about some solemn duty tonight. Let's talk about what this is really about. This has been about a political vendetta. A political vendetta that didn't just start with the Zelensky call. It started long before that. Just listen to some of the quotes from Democrats in this chamber. Speaker Pelosi, quote, "It's been going on for 22 months, 2.5 years actually. We cannot accept a second term for Donald Trump. What's more serious is that he can't win. This isn't about some crime that was committed. It's about fear that he might win re-election. That's not why you impeach a president." Al Green, quote, "I'm concerned that if we don't impeach this president, he will get re-elected." The list goes on, Madam Speaker. In fact, there's some quotes that I can't even read on this House floor that some of our colleagues made. And keep in mind, more than 100 Democrats on this House floor voted to impeach this president before the Zelensky phone call. Just look at some of these articles of impeachment that they voted for. 2 years ago, 58 Democrats voted to impeach the president over comments he made about NFL players kneeling for the Pledge of Allegiance. Impeaching the president, over 50 Democrats voted to impeach him for that. Just this summer, over 90 Democrats voted to impeach the president for comments he made about the squad. So he makes comments about some other members of Congress who make a lot of comments about him, and 95 members vote to impeach the president of the United States. This is a political vendetta. It has nothing to do with the crime committed. There was no crime. And why don't we listen to some of the witnesses? Obviously, we weren't able to call all the witnesses we wanted, but there were witnesses. In fact, Gordon Sondland, U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, he's mentioned over 600 times in the Schiff report. He was their star witness. And what did he say when asked? Quote, "Did President Trump ever tell you personally about any preconditions for anything?" His answer, no. Any preconditions for the aid to be released? No. Any preconditions for a White House meeting? Under oath, he testified, no. Abuse of power. Let's talk about that article of impeachment, Madam Speaker. George Washington law professor Turley, who admitted under oath that he voted against Donald Trump, spoke to this claim of abuse of power. In fact, he said, quote, "If you make a high crime and misdemeanor out of going to the courts, it is an abuse of power. It's your abuse of power. You are doing precisely what you are criticizing the president of doing. Abuse of power." There's a House rule, Madam Speaker, that requires, not allows, but requires that the minority get a day of hearing, which we asked for multiple times. They broke this rule. They didn't allow us to have a minority day of hearing. They didn't want to hear the facts about this case because it was never about the facts, because there was no crime. It is about a personal political vendetta. Now let's talk about obstruction of Congress as they make up these terms to impeach a president because they didn't find a crime and they were looking. It's been an impeachment in search of a crime. But they talk about obstruction of Congress and saying the president divides subpoenas, subpoena after subpoena. Let's go through the departments. The Department of State they subpoenaed. Do you know that literally just 4 days after the subpoena, the Secretary of State himself responded to your subpoena? The Department of Defense, a week later, responded to the subpoena. The Department of Energy responded to the subpoena. We can go on and on with all of these agencies. That's an abuse of power. That's an obstruction of Congress responding to your subpoena. That's what they did. They responded. You might not have liked the answer, but that's not the way this works. You don't impeach a president because you don't like his foreign policy, as so many of those foreign policy experts came and testified. But this isn't just about Donald Trump. They don't just hate Donald Trump, Madam Speaker. They hate the 63 million Americans who voted for this president, the forgotten men and women of this country who have been left behind, Madam Speaker.
House will be in order. Gentlemen may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's those forgotten men and women of this country that Washington had left behind. And what's this president doing for them? He's delivering for them. 600 jobs in Pennsylvania, 1,000 jobs, workers in Mingo Junction, Ohio, $750 million investment for 600 new jobs across this country. Detroit News, Chrysler, 6,500 new jobs. That's what this president is doing to deliver for those men and women of this country who had been left behind. It's about time somebody stands up for him, and President Trump is. So it is a political vendetta. But if they're going to go through with this, Madam Speaker, impeachment will not just be a stain on this Democrat majority. Impeachment will be their legacy.
Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. Gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I recognize Ms. Custer from New Hampshire for unanimous consent request.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I request the unanimous consent for enter in my statement into the record regarding the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge in favor of articles of impeachment. Thank you.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, it is now my pleasure to recognize the gentleman from Maryland, the Majority Leader of the House of Representatives, Mr. Hoyer, for 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized.
My colleagues,
The gentleman will suspend. The House will come to order. Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have had the honor of serving in this House for over 38 years. I've served during 6 presidencies. I've been here through moments of tremendous progress and terrible tragedy. I've seen periods of rank partisanship and patriotic bipartisanship. I've seen our two-party system work, and I've seen it break down. Never, in all my years of serving in this great institution that I love, and the people of my district, did I ever expect to encounter such an obvious wrongdoing by a president of the United States. Nor did I expect to witness such a craven rationalization of presidential actions, which have put our national security at risk, undermined the integrity of our elections, and defied the constitutional authority of the Congress to conduct oversight. We've heard from Republicans that this impeachment really has to do with policy differences or how we feel personally about the president, about his temperament, or that we simply dislike him.
Now, Donald Trump has become only the 3rd U.S. president to be impeached. The Democrat-controlled House of Representatives lost.
Why did you talk to your father like that? Mother, I only told you what my instinct was telling me. You Your instinct. Now, Tom, let me ask you a question. If your father came to the house, what would you do?
I am the president of the. I am the president of the United States. This is the White House living room area here. Okay, I will be speaking live. Okay. KFLG. Cool. BBC News. House. You.
Spring is the time to blaze new trails with old friends. Make the most of every adventure with the industry's fastest engaging all-wheel drive and GPS navigation that doesn't stop where the road ends. Polaris, think outside.
I don't know why they like this.
The office of the President of the United States of America is the highest in the land and an honor to hold. It is also of international importance as the President is a world leader and his decisions can affect us all.
This was the moment when the rise of the ocean began to slow the moment when we ended the war and secured our nation and restored our image as the last best hope on earth.
The race to decide the Democratic nominee for the 2008 U.S. presidential election was by anyone's standards a stirring moment in history. Although almost unimaginable only a few short years ago, it seemed likely that for the first time ever, the nominee would be a woman, and a woman with impeccable political credentials. Not only did Hillary Clinton have that famous surname to bolster her chances, she also had the political smarts and experience to do the job. But that dream ride to the White House was not to be, because her opposing candidate for the Democratic nomination was another one for the history books, the young national senator for the state of Illinois, Barack Obama.
It's history both ways. I mean, you got the first woman who could potentially be the president of the United States, and you have the first African-American male could be the president of the United States. So either way, we're looking at history.
It soon became apparent to observers across the globe that while in any other year Clinton would have had the nomination sewn up, she had the misfortune to face a politician who was truly one out of the box.
Are you uncomfortable in the role of chastising someone's idealism? Is that an uncomfortable place for you to be?
No, because I really admire that. I think that, the ability to inspire and certainly get people involved that we've seen from Senator Obama is wonderful. And I believe that it's important, though, that we remember the job has to be just the daily getting up and doing it. And I try to mix both of those because obviously I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't care deeply about changing our country and knowing that we could do better.
And after a protracted and sometimes bitter battle between these two standout candidates in mid-2008, Clinton stepped aside and resolved to help her erstwhile opponent in his greatest endeavor, to become President of the United States.
I am running to tell the corporate lobbyists that their days of setting the agenda in Washington are over. They have not funded my campaign. They will not work in my White House. And they will not drown out the voices of the American people when I'm President of the United States of America.
Barack Obama has a mixed ethnic background, but his dark skin means he has to be regarded as America's first genuine black presidential candidate. So how did he get to this exalted position? Phrases like meteoric rise trip off the tongue when you begin to consider this 47-year-old who only became a national senator in 2005. But in 3 short years, he has made an indelible impression.
Is he the one? South Carolina, I do believe he's the one to bring us the audacity of hope. Barack Obama! Barack Obama! It's Obama time! It's Obama time!
Barack Hussein Obama was born on the 4th of August 1961 in Honolulu, Hawaii. His father, also named Barack, was a Kenyan of the Luo tribe, born in Aligo near Lake Victoria. His mother was Ann Dunham, a white woman from Wichita, who had moved to Hawaii with her parents in 1959. She and Barack Sr. met while studying at the University of Hawaii, where he was the institution's first African student. Mixed racial marriages were still a rarity in the early 60s, and unfortunately this one wasn't to last. By the time he was 2 years old, Barack's parents had gone their own separate ways. He was to meet his father just once more, when Barack Sr. came to Hawaii for a month-long visit in the early 70s. Before that, his mother took the 6-year-old to live in Indonesia, where she married again. Her second husband was another student from the University of Hawaii, Lolo Soetoro, who had proposed to her before returning to Indonesia.
I think Barack Obama's great strength for Democratic voters is his story, which he's emphasized. It's an inspirational story. It's a story of a great merit, of somebody who has overcome enormous personal obstacles and has arisen as a result of his talent, skills, energy, and diligence.
This was my phone before Call Joy.
Liberia is going through tough economic times with inflation rates going over 28%. The staggering mismanagement and corruption have scared off foreign investors, and frustrated donors are withholding funds. Many Liberians are fed up and recently expressed their anger in the Save the State protest, with more protests planned. When he came into office, President George Weah promised to tackle poverty and corruption, but he is yet to deliver on his promises. For Liberians, the country's current state is a reminder of the dark days of the 14-year civil war. Could this mean President George Weah is losing his popularity?
Eh bien, Lynette, si on s'en tient à la mobilisation des partisans de l'opposition dans la rue ces derniers jours, plusieurs répondront oui, en plus de cette
Precisely, Lynette, if we stick to mobilizing opposition supporters on the streets in recent days, many will say yes. In addition, as a result of the economic crisis and soaring food prices, nearly 15,000 civil servants have still not received their salaries.
That's correct, Ruth. And Joshua Mersave is a senior policy analyst for Africa and the Middle East, and he joins us now to talk about the situation in Liberia. John, it's always good to have you in the program. So what would you say? Would you say President George Weah, who was expected to bring a wave of hope, has failed Liberians?
Well, I would say that President Weah has been a disappointment. There's no doubt about that. Now, he's still only a year and a half into his term, so I don't want to definitively say that he's been a failure to his people, but the early returns are very poor. He ran on an anti-corruption platform. He was viewed as untainted with the Americo-Liberian elite that had dominated the country really since independence, and which were oftentimes mired in corruption. And I think that there was a lot of hope around his ascension, and that he could be different from the previous regimes and the previous ruling elites who had been so corrupt and had pillaged the country. Unfortunately, he just hasn't been able to get any sort of handle on the corruption. The people around him appear to be very corrupt. There are even questions about him personally, where there are rumors of him building 50 some odd houses in a compound, and he claims it's his own money, and he is personally wealthy, of course, but it's still not a good look for someone who promised to clean up corruption.
And from various media reports, tens of millions of dollars have gone missing. Ambassadors have also expressed concern that the government is stealing aid money. What does this say of George Weah's government?
It says that it hasn't done nearly enough to tackle this devastating problem. Corruption kills, literally, in some ways. Corruption makes it difficult for hospitals, for instance, to get the drugs that they need, to stock them, and to treat patients, which is exactly what's happening right now in Liberia. Civil servants are going unpaid. So that's not solely due to corruption, but corruption exacerbates that problem. And the government of George Weah and those around him need to take a deep look and, frankly, be patriots.
You will start using the jam, or your car will spoil. The play ahead and are very close to spoiling that car. Now I'm telling you. All right. I know your thing was stupid. We don't know what happened here. I keep telling you the thing. Every time you use the jam, Every time you use the charm, we know that you're using charm. We know it. Not because we're not doing anything to you, but you got to stop the thing you're doing. That thing been so long now, you're just using the thing on people. The thing when the thing you're doing again, make people to not do anything for themselves. Again, make you can't do anything good for yourself. You gotta stop it. Or give that
and put the good of their country above their own interests. And unfortunately, it seems again that this government hasn't done that. Now, it's still new, as I said, only a year and a half in, so perhaps there can be some turnaround. But time is already running out for them, as the street protests have shown. People are very, very angry, and for good reason.
And John, what do you think Liberians can do beyond the protest movements that they have been staging to push their government to listen to their concerns on corruption?
Well, it's clear that there are engaged, concerned citizens. Again, there have been huge protests out on the streets led by the Council of Patriots, which is essentially an umbrella organization of opposition groups. And so I applaud that engagement and that pressure on the government demanding that they clean up some of these problems. They must remain nonviolent. That's absolutely critical. The last thing that Liberia can afford is violence on either side. So let's hope that remains the case, that everyone remains peaceful, even as they press their demands. The citizens, they really have to hold their government accountable, and that's hard to do in these societies. It's hard to do anywhere, but it's hard to do in Liberia as well. But they have to remain dedicated and committed. They have to demonstrate to the government that they will not accept business
all the money we have.
There must be a change. And then I would say honest people have to get into government. Honest, competent people have to run for election, get elected, and then remember that they're there to serve their people, not to serve themselves.
All the money they giving, or that the people give all the money to be buying charm with.
Really, dribbling. Wizard dribbler.
Since the people started giving us the money,
he's our hero.
So charm, you come with the charm business. So charm. You think we don't know yesterday you're go do the very same thing you do with the computer. That's why you're go do with the classes again yesterday. I know you did with stupid, we don't know what's going on yet. If I had anything to do with the jam, then the jam now where
it is at the heart of a swampy slum in Liberia's capital.
It will take all the amount of time before jam can wait.
A training ground that brings with team spirit. It is also an escape from the biting hand of poverty that has been dealt to the boys of Claratown football field.
I know that.
But the often watered pitch is most of all
package.
After humble beginnings on the same field, renowned footballer George Weah shot to international fame.
We all know that we are originated from the field. So people expect good things to come from this field. So they came here every day, they committed to the game. They are determined because they want to follow the footprint of George Weah. We want to become a good player to represent Africa.
I think it's stupid. I don't want to put myself into the problem. That's why you see I always myself like this. But you're really forcing people to put themselves in some kind of problem. Telling you to stop doing it.
George Weah is the first African footballer to be named World Player of the Year.
You know that social charm will get by with money.
He made his mark by scoring exceptional goals for top European teams.
You get maybe people taking their pressing up money and spending the thing on charm.
George will come on the field, and once he gets on the field, he will make a difference. So he was just different.
Taking your money, buying
on the line of football, he was just different.
Some kind of good thing.
He was surely gifted by God.
He brought proud to this nation when there were dark times, during our troubled times, when we were fighting war in this country. Sure, we were flying the flags of the Broha, outside to the outside world. He made us proud, and for that reason, we love him. We cherish him.
His rare talent led him to fame and celebrity status. In the football world, he was known as King George. Yet his beginnings were far from royal. One of his childhood friends, 43-year-old Veronica Doe, still lives in the neighborhood where he grew up.
Let me show you where we are living. Living out with grandmother before you go out. Contract.
He was abandoned by his parents and raised by his grandmother along with his aunt, Rebecca Lambe, in Gibraltar, one of the poorest areas in Monrovia.
We slept on one, he and myself in the house. On the ground. He was going to school. I was not going to school. I used to cook for them.
But his Liberia home today is a far cry from his troubled youth. A Mercedes and a BMW decorate his driveway, and he has a basketball court and a mini football pitch in his compound.
A series of challenges. Living in a community where there was no hope, a lot of friends in the street, gambling, using drugs. Glad I was raised by my grandmother. But then I don't know what to come. She taught me a whole lot. She taught me how to pray. She taught me how to forgive. She taught me how to love. She taught me how to be respectful, to go for what we want to do, and never give up.
George started playing football almost as soon as he could walk, just like most other children in Liberia.
He started playing football from a smaller time, and whenever he get out in the morning, we go look for him with me playing football.
Yeah, because we're not doing anything, but it doesn't mean we don't know that you're using the charm. We know that you're using the social charm. Basically,
the problem
was doing yesterday.
Football.
We are aware
vast
of it.
majority of the kids get involved in football.
Yeah, because we don't do nothing to you, but that means you want to keep doing the thing.
Like a religion. People are football crazy. They love the game. We play with barefooted, no sneakers, no shoes. And
I think somebody go do the thing to your channel. They think you're doing that. Somebody, if they go do it to your now, you will get mad.
Maybe your knee, pierce your legs, and you cry, you beat the field. So that's the memory of football, playing in front of our house.
You said that you know that Jenna, if you try to go somewhere, the way you're using the thing, you know that you can't do anything right now.
Aged 15, George caught the eye of
And
sports
then thing you
journalist
try to do now,
Omari Jackson.
you're working with a whole lot of
He
people that
started
they will go
reporting
stop
on a
to
young
it.
footballer with a dream.
Initially, he was kind of lazy player, but when the coaches realized that he had the talent, he gave the ability to do what they wanted him to do. They spent time on him.
People call me lazy, weak, and all of those adjectives were used on me. But I kept my focus. I wanted to persevere. I wanted to prove to.
Liberia is going through tough economic times with inflation rates going over 28%. The staggering mismanagement and corruption have scared off foreign investors, and frustrated donors are withholding funds. Many Liberians are fed up and recently expressed their anger in the Save the State protest, with more protests planned. When he came into office, President George Weah promised to tackle poverty and corruption, but he is yet to deliver on his promises. For Liberians, the country's current state is a reminder of the dark days of the 14-year civil war. Could this mean President George Weah is losing his popularity?
Eh bien, Lynette, si on s'en tient à la mobilisation des partisans de l'opposition.
Then stop using the thing on people. And you're telling people all kind of things. You know that the thing taking too long. They're taking so long that day for you to finish. We're almost in the 6-7 month. And when you're using the charm on somebody, you know that you can't do any other thing. You can't even go anywhere. That means you have to sit down for that amount of time. You have to just sit down to the place where they want you to do the charm business. You have to just sit down there until they finish. Until they finish doing everything they want to do before you can do any other thing. What time y'all will finish doing everything y'all want to do before somebody can do any other thing? That's why we're talking here. I thought that's something that you just did for 1 or 2 weeks and you're finished with it. Then the same thing that people go do in California, then you go spend a whole lot of you can't waste. You're wasting my time like this. They play. I myself, yeah, I got problem with my body. I gotta go solve some problem. They play right now. I'm feeling too alright. I'm not alright. Nothing alright with me right now. You just sit down there. You don't even know what happening to somebody. You're just wasting my time. Then you're turning around and start complaining. That's why we're telling you. I say I'm feeling. I'm feeling okay. I want to go places.
Okay, we've got some breaking news coming to us here via Thames Valley Police, who have confirmed the death of the singer George Michael at the age of 53. His publicist has said he passed away peacefully at home. The singer, who was 53, launched.
We have a problem. We want to go, trying to go walk after problem business. You see people now, you sit down here, somebody not working, we're not doing anything, we ain't got anything, then you go use charm on the person on that boy. And then you go waste the person time. You don't understand. I say right now, I said we're not even able to, we got so many problems, so many things wrong with us. You must say the package you just receive again at another charm business again. Because you and the UPS man, you're just kind of see. I just have to say, you know the time the UPS man coming. Then you go get a package. You calling somebody crazy again today. How can you and the man count at the same time? Just to say you know exactly what we're doing. You go rushing to go get a package from the man. You man that something that happened again where we go send for the package, you go get it. And we're talking the thing, then you still doing the charm business, then you telling somebody all kind of thing on top of it. They think we're telling you it will not the year will not end. They will not be whole year round, and then we go enter another birthday again. Y'all go waste my time again. It will not be so. Y'all better hurry up with your charm business and leave me alone. And y'all mind your business. I think they think taking too much time. Just to say you're just relaxing yourself with the charm business. You're just getting too comfortable with it. Just because you're inside the house, you in the house, then you're using charm. And they kind of thing that y'all can get comfortable. That you're comfortable feeling. I know you're stupid. You think we don't know that you can do that kind of thing. That you're the one stupid because you're supposed to know that we know that you can do that kind of thing. But because you're so stupid, we know that you even if we would have tell you say you stop the thing, you will not stop. You will still go ahead and go use the charm. That's why we never say anything. Even if we told you, say you stop using the charm, you will still be using the thing. I know you think we don't know what we don't know that you are coming to the kind of thing. We know you are coming to do it. But if we come to you and tell you, say you want to stop using the thing on people, you will not stop. That the one you're acting stupid. You're using the thing on people. Then on top of it, you thinking say we don't even know what's going on.
For George Weah in a slum like this one.
I know you think we're stupid. We're trying to tell you sense. If we don't have anything for anybody.
Several decades on, the number 14 is president.
You see, I don't have anything for anybody, but if you're using charm or if you just using the charm on us like that.
I noticed nobody was going in hard with the tackles on you. Is that a sort of presidential decree?
No. They're afraid. They're afraid to mark me because, I'm the best dribbler. And if they try, they will dislocate some of the body.
But George Weah is being tackled over his handling of the economy. There's a little foreign investment and inflation at 23% has nearly doubled in a year. But alleged corruption and economic mismanagement are the biggest concerns. Last year, an official admitted that $100 billion worth of state money printed
the thing where you and the UPS, it looks like you that charm business is in your. It look like you know the time the UPS car coming. Maybe there's somebody now tell him say the UPS car coming. That's why you left the house.
Problematic. It's even more scary.
Everything they are doing that so charm your own.
George Weah's government has promised universities.
You know that they can be telling him say we send for some kind of package or we doing something. They're telling you everything.
Liberia aren't just dissatisfied.
Because how you and the man came together, then you go receive the package.
Over the vanished cash and the president's failure to publicly declare his assets are further.
I didn't know that part of even the package you just received that part of the charm business.
Issues in the coming days, in the coming months, we can assure the world that there will be a nationwide protest.
Everything you see where we're trying to tell you. If everything we doing, you're nowhere, boy. Everything you're nowhere, boy. Everything you're involved in it. Then what thing we can do now that you're not involved in it?
Years of civil war.
We can't do anything. Once you're using the charm here, you can't do nothing.
I'm not profiting from government. And
you got everything you go send for package that you will get. That's the thing you just did a part of the charm again.
Those that
you go do another thing again that part of the charm again, you will go do something again.
Despite all the criticisms, George Weah is just 1 year into his presidency.
Oh,
it's around this fertile and beautiful
exactly.
Clock is coming to you.
How come?
BBC News, Liberia.
I think you know that they're working with a whole lot of
Hi, I'm Patrice Jua, a writer, poet, entrepreneur, and former Miss Liberia. Today, I'll be showing you around my beautiful city, Monrovia.
With 1.2 million inhabitants, Monrovia, Liberia's capital city, is home to a quarter of the country's total population. It's an extremely young population. More than 60% are younger than 15 years old. With the Atlantic Ocean on one side and the Mesurado River on the other, many people make their living from fishing, but the city and its people are still recovering from past traumas of 2 civil wars. Ruins in the town are reminders of the city's dark chapter of warlords and child soldiers.
We're at Duca Palace Hotel, and this used to be one of the most luxurious hotels in West Africa. Like many other buildings across the city, it was destroyed during the country's 14 years of civil war. Today, it stands as a shadow of its previous self. But the story is gracefully changing with the vibrancy reflected through our beautiful city and through our beautiful hip-hop music. You'll find out.
I know how long you're coming. You're going to be doing the kind of thing. You're practicing charm. You're still on people
the streets of Monrovia. With its social and political messages, it grew stronger.
I'm coming to end whole year.
As vibrant as its people, Monrovia is
charm
gradually developing into a modern metropolis.
I got my different thing
to
do.
Like here in Sinko, with its variety of shops, restaurants, and entertainment centers. The right place to take some time out.
I got my own problem. I got a whole lot of problem on me.
Lila Brown is only one place to name.
So you gotta stop the jump.
In this busy city, it's famous for its garden and its delicious smoothies.
Yeah, I give you too many warning now. I tired giving warning. When you see something happening, I don't believe me.
Inspiration to work on a project close to her heart. Her foundation provides scholarships and mentorship to girls in rural Liberia.
I got me go whole year with you. That's what we're trying to tell you. They did now that another month.
For now,
another new month.
Monrovia is a coastal city, and on weekends and holidays like today, the beaches come alive. Today we are here on Bernard's Beach in the heart of the city, having ourselves a jolly good time. I've truly enjoyed showing you around my beautiful city, Monrovia, and I hope you will visit us soon. Bye-bye for now.
So what are you waiting for? The beaches of Monrovia are waiting, because LIB is the place to be.
You get money. When you get money now, you gap.
We're getting a ride.
When you get money, you enjoy LIB. You ain't get money.
We're going to Monrovia. We're going to spend 72 hours showing you the sights and sounds of Liberia. We're going to go everywhere.
50. Please. How much for this? Buen meat.
Oh, you won't sell just one?
They got it buen meat.
Liberia. I like it because then it's like I've never seen something like this before. That every tribe has a mask. Yeah, it's nice. They're like some of them are very similar. Running a travel and tourism company here in Liberia, promoting the country's landscapes, the hotels, what to see, what to do, activities. And I think it's just a really important conversation to have.
To go, and it's really known for its really great food. They have a really great Thai Japanese menu up here on the rooftop. It's also the Friday night spot, like the pre-spot where everybody comes and turns up a little bit before hitting the town. And yeah, it's a beautiful property, really modern rooms, tons and tons. It's so funny. I find it that I come across more
wondering like what other industries, I mean, tourism, nuances and hints of it where you can tell.
Oh, well, I guess. No, you think we don't know what happened in the oh, yeah, because I'm not very the thing you're doing, I'm correct. You see?
You know, you've heard of Liberia. We joke about Liberia all the time. We're always comparing ourselves to you guys. Heard that it has the best panoramic view. I think, you know, I look at it and I'm like, it still feels so grand. Like it feels, you can still feel how powerful and how magnificent. You know, it's really bounced back, and it's great. I'm like really excited for Liberia, really. If you break my heart, I go dead to your father. Wanna be my son, you go call me your mother. Say if you break my heart, I go dead to your father. I feel like when I come, the same kind of things are going on in town. Is no, definitely you wouldn't see the same thing. I forgot it again. So what are you? She's probably the biggest, like the biggest female tycoon that I've ever known. Town by road, and you know, people like, you know, just that because this will broadcast on YouTube. Enough for you to be able to export. You know, that's so much stuff here. Really, like local market. I mean, we're not like I'm already just owning Robert's Point. I'm not even buying everything. I'm not even dealing with the long coastline that we have. Artisanal fish.
If you they're gonna be playing with it. This is the lobster.
Oh my god, I can't believe this is like my breakfast. This is huge. Like, yeah. Your mother. Say if you break my heart, I go dead to your father. You gonna be my son, you go call me your mother. I'll go fear. Every time I go fear. I'll go fear. And that's what I'm taking with me, that Liberians are really friendly and they're open. And not only is it open, it's just like, it's great. Like I really, really had a lovely time. So forget what you know and forget what you've heard and give Liberia a chance. When you're thinking of a place to explore, come to Liberia. And I'm sure that it'll surprise you. This is Vicky Rameau on the border of Sierra Leone and Liberia saying, thank you, man. I had a wonderful time and see you next time on another edition of the Vicky Rameau Show. Me love you. Me love you. Me love you. See the love I have for you. The love I have for you. See the love I have for you. It's for nobody else but you.
If you break my heart, I will date your father. Ebone. Oh, did it play something like that? If you break my heart like a did your father. You see what we say here about the charm. Everything you doing, you're involved. Now, when you go somewhere now where you're not involved in the charm, no charm business in that area, they will not allow you to do anything there. We go send for package. You are the one. How you manage to know the UPS truck coming? That because you're using the charm. You know the time the time we send for the package. You're in contact with the people. Because you all of a sudden you go receive my package. You think I don't know what time my package coming? I know the time my package coming. I checking on the every minute. They think you're doing that. So charm business. When you send for something, you know that we're sending for the thing. You're already waiting to. You just gotta be part of the charm business. Everything we send for, the phone, the game, everything. Anything we try to do, you're always involved. We know that the charm business, that charm business, yeah. But where's the actual video of it? She different from the girl. She different from Ebone different from I call her Ebone.
Hey boy, Sinkani, you be someone. It's the one got this. Delilah, where you? I'm here. Hello, Father. See, I heard him say, boy, you the prayer. You the play like win, score like fashion. Boy, you the baddest. I can give you my heart, give you body. I will do anything for you. You they like in Kana, like in power. Buffalo Quad, Bambali. Sacrifice my life to be your wife. I'm gonna be there for you. But if you break my heart, I go date your father. Say if you break my heart, I go date your father. That is too easy. My name is Ankala, your mother. Oh baby, oh baby, oh baby, oh baby. Say if you break my heart, I go date your father. But it's too easy. My name is Ankala, your mother. The love I have for you, boy. The love I have for you.
Hey. What's this? This is not a song, man. Oh, I think y'all want some. What a video of the actual girl. I know that.
If you break my heart, I go date your father. Danny Beat, the 90s bad girl. See, I think this shit is really, really funny. Like, this is a whole mood right here. This is a whole mood. Okay, Lori Harvey, girl. You're securing that bag, you know what I'm saying? Like, you really securing that bag. Yeah, I'm talking with my broken nail. I don't care. But Lori Harvey, try, girl. All I gotta say is, you bold, girl. You bold. You bold. If y'all don't know, Lori Harvey is Steve Harvey's stepdaughter. She's allegedly engaged to Diddy. Diddy that is old enough to be your papa. My God. I mean, there's nothing wrong with dating older men. I've dated older. Don't do that, ladies. Like, that's my advice. I feel like, yeah, older men are kind of more mature, but not in all
cases, some men, the older they get, the dumber they get. If you've experienced that, comment down below because I've experienced that. So it just depends on the person. I've met younger guys that are so mature. I'm like, what the hell? Like, are you sure? You're 25? What? Like, they carry themselves so well. It just depends. But today we're not talking about my personal business. We're talking about Lori Harvey. Backstory, okay? She was dating the son, Diddy's son, Justin, a while ago. So it's just so weird that people have been seeing her in like clubs and like parties with Diddy hanging out. It's like, why are you hanging out with your ex-boyfriend's dad?
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
It doesn't matter if it's a cold day or a hot day. Either way, it's a work day. And
let's go! Boy, you a player. You the score like Messi, play like Kaka, dribble like Wakaso. You the like Barcelona, Real Madrid, Arsenal, Man U, Chelsea. I will give you my heart, give you body, do anything for you. Sacrifice my life to be yours. I'm gonna be there for you. But if you break my heart, I will date your father. You gonna be my son, you go call me your mother. Say if you break my heart, I will date your father. You gonna be my son, you go call me your mother. I'll go fear, every time I'll go fear. I'll go fear, some because I see me. Me love you, me nature, me love you. Me love you, some because I see me. See the love I have for you, the love I have for you. See the love I have for you. It's all about me, but you. Back, I see you, don't say I get on more. Bobby stand, you don't say I hold on more. And don't start there when I don't start you on more. Let's go! Me, I don't like Versace, and I don't like designer. Me, I don't like Ferrari, and I don't like Bugatti.
Same time.
I will give you my heart, give you body, do anything for you. Sacrifice my life to be your wife. I'm gonna be there for you. But if you break my heart, I will date your father. You gonna be my son, you go call me your mom. If you break my heart, I will date your father.
What they say again, if they're doing it, you will not be able to do anything for yourself. If you try to do anything for yourself, it will stop you.
You like Barcelona, Real Madrid, Arsenal, Man U, Chelsea. I will give you my heart, give you my lips, do anything for you. Sacrifice my life to be your wife. I'm gonna be there for you. But if you break my heart, I will date your father.
Everything, and then everything you see that we study for, they know about it.
get close to the words of the prophets. God is in there. Moses told his people to put scripture in little boxes and tie it.
Time records. Got myself a sponsor. Anything me ask, get it bye.
Everything.
Even though it's older, but I got to survive in this life. Another one who is younger. When I ask for something, does I cry? Missy Papa, I'm a baby, I'm a baby. Let's spread my life out, but she not coming one. And I hope if I'm in jail, so they must have my own kind of stuff. Slow down, sissy, I'm here. Yeah, pull it for me, slow down. Because I'm here, I need to pull it for me, slow down. Sissy, I'm here. Yeah, pull it for me, slow down. Because I'm here, oh, mercy, mercy, mercy. These brokers have lots of energy. They make me don't turn out just like oven, but when the morning comes, we not have nothing. A boyfriend who can't buy you food when you're hungry.
Is I want to a person I change and move fast to stop the lanes. I got myself a sponsor. Let's see what I am, yeah, my baby. That's what I try, but she not coming quick. I don't remember me saying this on the was my organization. Pulling for me, slow down. This is the idea. Pulling for me, slow down. Because I am here. I pulling for me, slow down.
This is the idea. Look at it.
Pulling for me, slow down. Because I am here.
They know everything. They know the time we order the
these brokers have lots of energy.
and they using the time for us.
Now which young girl don't fear hunger?
People calling and telling them saying,
girl bunny in dilemma. Alewa, or Kelewa, or Pincha, maybe when you're five. Let's see what I am, yeah, my baby. That's what I try, but she not coming quick. I don't remember me saying so they must have my organization. Pulling for me, slow down. This is the idea. Pulling for me, slow down. Because I am here. Pulling for me, slow down. This is the idea. Pulling for me, slow down. Because I am here. Mercy, mercy, mercy. These brokers have lots of energy. Bounce to the beat, diamond. Everybody make you bounce to the beat. All the contest, bounce to the beat, demon. Everybody make you bounce to the beat, Ghana. Yeah, bounce to the beat, yeah. Everybody make you bounce to the beat, yeah. All the contest, bounce to the beat, okay. Everybody make you bounce to the beat, yeah. Pulling for me, slow down. This is the idea. Pulling for me, slow down. Because I am here. Pulling for me, slow down. This is the idea. Pulling for me, slow down. Because I am here. Mercy, mercy, mercy.
yes. Look at what he did. He telling us that he didn't receive it. That's why we getting it.
Waiting. Okay,
to wait for the UPS car to come. They just be pretending, they be telling them that something that maybe that's
I've been hustling in the morning, in the afternoon and in the evening. Person caution as we can again. Intimation share, give me the pussy I'm ready and never been toy. Me wano, can't pray, and wano.
they just say that you see what now working with them, at least if they disturbing the girl and not disturbing somebody like this. Disturbing me. Every time you come here, you made a champion, go meet somebody, go do something like that. You go disturb me. Now the thing is, some of the things we want to do, we can't even do.
This is how they look. They are.
Maybe I ain't got no fee.
Rakuten is an awesome way to earn cash back with little or no effort. You can use Rakuten in over.
If you break my heart, I go dead to your father. My castle, you know, say I get a more. Bobby stand, you know, say I own a more. And those that day where I don't sabi do one more. Me, I don't like Versace. And I don't like designer. Me, I don't like Ferrari. And I don't like Bugatti. I will give you my heart, give you body, do anything for you. To be your wife, I'm gonna be there for you.
Hey, what y'all doing, man?
If you break my heart, I go dead to your father. Johnny beat, the 90s bad girl trend. See, I heard them say, boy, you a player. You the score like Messi, play like Kaka, dribble like Picasso. You the like Barcelona, Real Madrid, Arsenal, Man U, Chelsea. I go give you my heart, give you body, do anything for you. Sacrifice my life to be your wife. I'm gonna be there for you. But if you break my heart, I go dead to your father. You gonna be my son, you go call me your mother. Say if you break my heart, I go dead to your father. You gonna be my son, you go call me your mother. I'll go fear, every time I'll go fear. I'll go fear, some because I see me. Me love you, me let me love you. Me love you, some because I see me. See the love I have for you, the love I have for you. See the love I have for you. It's for nobody else but you. My cousin, you know, say I get a more. Bobby stand, you know, say I own a more. And those that day where I don't sabi do one more. Me, I don't like Versace, and I don't like designer. Me, I don't like Ferrari, and I don't like Bugatti. I will give you my heart, give you body, do anything for you. Sacrifice my life to be your wife. I'm gonna be there for you. But if you break my heart, I go dead to your father. You gonna be my son, you go call me your mother. Say if you break my heart, I go dead to your father. You gonna be my son, you go call me your mother. I'll go fear, every time I'll go fear. I'll go fear, some because I see me. Me love you, me let me love you. Me love you, some because I see me. Get it back. I see you, no say I get a more. Bobby stand, you no say I own a more. And those that day where I don't sabi do a more. Me, I don't like Versace, and I don't like designer. Me, I don't like Ferrari, and I don't like Bugatti. I'll go fear, every time I'll go fear. I'll go fear, some because I see me. Me love you, me let me love you. Me love you, some because I see me.
Rough time, my kids. Yo, Five, it's Africa's very own.
Look, I like you.
You've put country and community first. As a proud American company, we're here to say thanks.
If you break my heart, I go dead to your father. Johnny beat, the 90s bad girl trend. See, I heard them say, boy, you a player. You the score like Messi, play like Kaka, dribble like Picasso. You the like Barcelona, Real Madrid, Arsenal, Man U, Chelsea. I go give you my heart, give you body, do anything for you. Sacrifice my life to be your wife. I'm gonna be there for you. But if you break my heart, I go dead to your father. You gonna be my son, you go call me your mother. Say if you break my heart, I go dead to your father. You gonna be my son, you go call me your I see me, me love you, me love you, me love you, say me cause I see me, see the love I have for you, the love I have for you, see the love I have for you, it's for nobody else but you. I see you, no say I get a more. Bobby stand you, no say I own a more. And no start there where I don't sabi do one more. Me I don't like Versace, and I don't like designer. Me I don't like Ferrari, and I don't like Bugatti. I will give you my heart, give you body, do anything for you. Sacrifice my life to be your wife. I'm gonna be there for you. But if you break my heart, I go date your father. You cannot be my son, you go call me your mother. Say if you break my heart, I go date your father. You cannot be my son, you go call me your mother. I'll go for you, every time I'll go for you. I'll go for you, so make us happy, me love you, me love you, me love you, so make us happy, me Bobby stand you, no say I own a more. And no start there where I don't sabi do one more. Me I don't like Versace, and I don't like designer. Me I don't like Ferrari, and I don't like Bugatti. I'll go for you, every time I'll go for you. I'll go for you, so make us happy, me love you, me love you, me love you, so make us happy, me
Of time because Yo Vibe is Africa's very own. Of time because Lily States, Mighty Stitch.
One day you will know. These are the words of my mother. As I'm getting old, even now I remember. So I'm packing on my tools. I'm going back at home. A young girl like me shouldn't be caught with a notebook. He told me he was a banker, not knowing bank robber. This man is a gangster who come bank boxer. Oh sorry I'm no bad, but I'm boy. If you ever yeah, so can I can't go. Now you everything, every night and day. Mommy shit, used to want me, but I didn't wanna know. Mommy shit, mommy show, mommy shit, mommy show, mommy shit, mommy show. Yeah, I know they hear me. Now picking up the hear mama, picking up the hear papa. And then kwada yaba, social media neda. Better na ya boba pa, better na ya nyodo pa. Nasi wakoda na udiya uwukotenia usiyago. He told me he was a banker, not knowing bank robber. This man is a gangster, bukum bankum boxer. I'm sorry I'm no pa, but I'm a bodam boy. A dreary Shakanika Jango. Now you everything, every night and day. Mommy shake, used to want me, but I didn't wanna know. Mommy shake, mommy show, mommy shake, mommy show, mommy shake, mommy show. Yeah, I know they hear me. I hate you so much right now. 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 One day you will know. These are the words of my mother. As I'm getting old, even now I remember. So I'm packing on my tools. I'm going back at home. A young girl like me shouldn't be caught without no school food. He told me he was a banker, not knowing bank robber. This man is a gangster. Who come bang bang boxer.
Y'all got to stop that kind of thing.
But I didn't wanna know, Mama Shit.
I think you're taking long, you're wasting somebody time.
Every night and day, Mama Shit. Used to want me, but I didn't wanna know, Mama Shit. And throwing him through the ground floor windows of Tower 2. Having suffered burns to 40% of his body, he will be one of the 20 critically injured patients rushed to the Presbyterian's burn unit that day.
I screamed, and I pulled up real tight. I was scared. I didn't know what to do, you know. And then as my eyes was closed, I saw my son.
A clear message was delivered. The first plane to crash was not an accident. America was under attack. The plane struck level 78 to 85, forming a barrier between hope on the lower level and despair above the impact zone. The wingtip grazed the 78th floor sky lobby, instantly killing dozens of people waiting for elevators. In both towers, the staircases were located close together, in the core of the building, near the elevator shaft. When the first tower was hit, all stairways were immediately severed by the plane, or blocked by debris.
Maybe that was she and her friends coming.
The impact on the South Tower, however, happened on levels where the stairs could around heavy elevator machinery. So instead of running near the building core, 2 stairways are closer to the perimeter.
Receive the package.
On the northwest side, 1 stairway survived the impact.
Except for because what they've been doing, another test.
Survivor stories, phone calls, text messages, and email from the upper levels helped to estimate that more than 1,000 survived the initial crash.
People.
Some 300 of those are high in the South Tower, 800 more higher in the North Tower. Men and women from the impact zone or higher are known to have used the South Tower surviving staircase to reach the relative safety of New York streets. The plane's initial impact causes widespread damage on the floor above and below the impact zone. The twisting and bending of the buildings caused deformation of door frames, jamming and shut, fallen debris and plasterboard blocked exit doors and stairwells. Hundreds find themselves trapped in offices, boardrooms, or toilets. A small group of Port Authority workers freed 28 people trapped in offices on the 86th and 89th floor of the North Tower. They have to use considerable force to open the jammed doors. This small group of rescuers will never be seen again. Witnesses and those who managed to reach the streets were facing an emergency they could not comprehend.
I didn't see what happened. I saw people jumping out of the building just now. I'm trying to save my
sister. They're not even asking any questions. They're doing all kind of things. They're going crazy.
Stories of tragic fate and lucky
You
escape
see, they
emerged.
just doing all kind of things. They're doing hitting people car.
Jim Pierce, a
Whereby
cousin
I
of
got
George
nothing
Bush,
to do
a
with the
managing
whole thing.
director for the AON Corporation, had organised a conference for the morning on the 105th floor.
You see, whole lot of that everything they don't understand that
As
everything
the
that
group was
making
too
me
large for
angry.
the
That what
meeting
we
room
were
on
telling
that
them.
floor, the conference was moved
I
to
said
the nearby
they
Millennium
really got to
Hotel.
stop the kind of thing now because they don't know. I don't know how
12
long they gonna
participants,
think.
unaware the conference was moved, were on the 105th floor when the plane hit.
Maybe
Only one
the
survived.
particular package that came, it can be
As for President Bush
that,
himself, he was
like
in
a
Florida
test.
to promote his
They say
education
they
reform
were
at the
testing the
time of
charm
the first
again to
attack.
see whether the charm working.
As he is reading with the students, Chief
Because
of Staff
everything
Andrew
we
Card
they so
whispered to Bush,
test.
a second
The
plane hit the
other
World Trade
two
Center.
soda we send
America
for
is
again
under
another
attack.
test again. They just
Today we've had a national tragedy.
testing the charm.
2 airplanes have crashed
You see.
into the World Trade Center.
So they told him
apparent
that we
terrorist
will
attack
send for maybe they told him that we will send for some kind of
I have
package
spoken
as
to
a
the Vice
test.
President, to the Governor of New York,
Now we see our friends
to the
then
Director
coming
of
to
the
the us
FBI,
again and they all they kind of thing
and
now.
I've ordered
You
that the full
can't, it
resources of
just
the
gotta
federal
be
government
all part of the charm.
go to help the victims and their families.
After his address, Bush is rushed to a back room and disappears from public eye for many hours. Soon after 9 a.m., many in the Pentagon received phone calls telling them to turn on their television. Like so many, they watch in horror the smoke coming from the World Trade Center as the live pictures of United Airlines Flight 175 crashing into the South Tower are broadcast. Departing a few minutes after Flight 175 is American Airlines Flight 77,
the thing makes
a
sense.
Boeing 757 with 58 passengers, 6 crew members, and 37,000 litres of fuel.
Probably they go
5
put the
hijackers
charm
are
there
also on board the
to
plane.
use it for they did everything for
Sometime
tests.
between 8:50 and
All the
8:54
things we
a.m.,
bought.
they will gain control of the plane,
Now
change course, and head for Washington.
He probably know that we bought the thing
Flight
before.
77 crashes into the western
So
side of
he
the Pentagon
go receive
and
the
starts
thing.
a violent fire. The passengers and crew members are all killed instantly. Brian Birdwell laid burning and bleeding on the second floor, meters from where the nose of the plane penetrated the building. 60% of his body is burned. He has difficulty breathing and can't stand up. Water started dripping from the sprinkler. The cold water extinguished the fire, searing his body. As the roaring fire continues to burn, Birdwell found the strength to open his eyes. Through the smoke pouring from the hallway and the scattered debris, he saw some lights. He knew he needed to get moving. He started to make his way towards the light. As he reaches the corridor door, Birdwell saw some friends.
Yes, sir.
Exhausted, he collapsed in front of them. The men carry Birdwell out.
Oh, the family minister.
Birdwell spent 92 days in hospital. There,
Minister of Foreign Affairs.
To reconstruct his face and ears. He said there was no way to describe the pain he went through. 9 men and women were sent to the burn unit that day. Only 2 were expected to survive. 8
Right down this the Defense Minister.
The blast from the plane and the resulting fire killed 125 Pentagon personnel. A series of fortunate events prevented the loss of more lives. The crash site near the heliport was the best prepared to withstand such an attack. Following the attack in Oklahoma City, this side of the Pentagon was undergoing substantial renovation. The walls were being reinforced and a sprinkler system was being installed. On the morning of the attack, most of the work had been completed, and most offices were unoccupied due to the renovation. The reinforcement of the walls prevented the building from collapse for 30 minutes, enough time for hundreds of people to crawl to safety. The sprinklers.
I think they look at it, they want that they now that how you call it kind of thing. Like how you will be behaving every time somebody go tell you or something.
Civilian aircraft
Then you just get out and go do it to somebody.
Ordered to land at the nearest airport as soon as possible.
I know you're stupid or something.
Air traffic control will redirect all international flights.
Somebody who done something.
No commercial flights are allowed in the
You look at they kind of room with they kind of thing. Then you go say somebody got something for you.
Ordered to land as soon as possible, but no reply comes back from the cockpit. Beverly Eckert was on the phone with her husband Sean Rooney. Mr. Rooney wanted to know where the fire was as he was making his way to the roof, hoping to be rescued there. Still on the phone, Beverly heard a loud explosion before the line drops out. Like millions, she watched in horror.
They look at the kind of room, they look at the place we live in, then you go man people. Just to can't waste somebody down.
On the streets away. I'm sure of what's just happened. The South Tower collapsed 56 minutes after being struck. Only 14 people escaped from the impact zone of the South Tower after it was hit, and only people from the floors above it. They escaped by stairwell A, the only stairwell that had been left intact after the
everything happened right here to this house.
Sean Rooney and Michael are not with those who escaped.
That's fiasco.
Monica and
They already got behavior problem. Someone you try to do some kind of thing, they come there. They start telling you all kind of things.
Worked on the 84th floor of the South Tower. He had called his wife Monica soon after the first plane hit. He was safe. As Monica put the phone down, he saw from the corner of her eye the second plane.
This was the defending.
Monica tried to call Michael back. The line was dead. On September 12th, Monica, like so many, was desperately searching for Michael. Picture in hand, she went through hospitals desperately hoping to find him. Like so many, she came back home with only his picture. Since the tragedy, Monica has gone on to form the September Mission, a foundation dedicated to the development of a memorial park for the victims on the World Trade Center site.
You can't build over people, and a lot of people feel that way. Even people that didn't work down there, people that haven't had lost anyone, they see it as the same thing. It's like a war zone, and you don't build on a war zone, and you don't build over dead people, and they might not feel comfortable having an office space there in that area where you're kind of feeling like those people lost their lives because they went to work.
Monica hoped for months, waiting for a call from Ground Zero with the news that they had found her husband's remains. The phone never rang. Finding closure has been incredibly hard for Monica. She feels it's important for the healing process to have a place, a memorial, on the site where Michael perished.
Something you can't explain. the way you'll connect with your loved one, whoever you are. You can maybe go to a particular spot and say, oh, he was here, Tower 2, and maybe that area, and say, let me find a space for myself that I can always feel closure. And I'll come to that particular space, and Michael will meet me there. I'm convinced I'll get closure every time I go there if I have the right space to do that.
As the roar of the cliffs goes silent, a grey-white cloud of powdered concrete and gypsum rushes through the streets. Witnesses describe it as a heavy fog. Visibility was no more.
If the person know that you will do something,
Remain calm. Those who escape the cloud of smoke are mostly injured. Covered in dust, rubbing their eyes and looking dazed, they start walking away. The streets of New York looked like a war zone. The landscape was unrecognizable. As the crisis continued to escalate, more firefighters, police officers, and paramedics rushed to the scene. Many would never be seen again. It is estimated that the collapse of the South Tower killed 630 people, almost everyone above the impact zone. In 2007, the New York City Medical Examiner's Office added Felicia Dunn-Jones to the official death toll. Dunn-Jones died 5 months after 9/11 from a lung condition, which was linked to exposure to dust during the collapse of the World Trade Center. The collapse of the South Tower also affected those who were escaping the North Tower. Tom Canavan, a 42-year-old security specialist, was working in a bank on the 47th floor of the North Tower. He was on a conference call when at 8:46 a.m. a plane crashed high in his building. He had ample time to evacuate before the collapse, but he stayed behind to help put securities back in the vault. At 9:03 a.m. when the second plane hit, Canavan was in a congested stairway making his way down. At 9:59, Canavan was following the evacuation route. He passed through revolving doors and was making his way in an underground shopping mall that connected the North and South Tower. He heard a rumble. The South Tower was coming down. Tom was buried alive. Remarkably, as he opens his eyes, Canavan realizes he is not alone. Both Tom and the other men will crawl through 70 feet of debris from the underground mall to an outdoor plaza. 25 minutes after he was buried alive, Tom Canavan was free.
Big boom. Come down the steps. Everything fine until we got to the basement, and then everything just fell in. I got trapped under there with another guy. Crawled out. Kept getting hit in the head. Hit bags all around. Finally, we clawed our way out over the rubble.
Tom was soon taken to hospital, where he received a few stitches and then checks himself out. As the year passes, the physical wounds will heal, but he will find it harder to heal the psychological effects caused by the collapse.
Because at first I had no trouble sleeping, and it was sort of brushed aside. I don't know if it was a denial or whatever, but now it affects me. I sleep maybe 4 hours a night. I'm on medication.
Since crawling out and walking away almost uninjured, Canavan has struggled. Mostly, his feelings were affected. He found himself snapping quite often. He had no patience for his wife and children. Through therapy, he manages to get his emotions under control. Returning to work quickly was also
the thing we ask is for them to.
As the life of millions has in one way or another changed, Tom's words echo those of a great majority.
It didn't really change me, but it made me realize that my life before this, that I had it good before this, that I didn't realize how good it was before this, and that I just want it to be like it was. I don't need it to be any better. I just need it to be as it was before any of this happened.
At 10:03, the last hijacked plane will miss its target. The courage of those on board will ensure that many more casualties are avoided. The plane fragmented upon impact, leaving a large crater. Debris was found kilometres from the crash site. Phone calls made from the plane uncovered unlikely heroes.
She's so weird.
Jeremy Glick called his wife and told her the flight was hijacked by 3 dark-skinned men that looked Iranian, wearing red bandanas and wielding knives. Glick remained connected until the end of the flight. He reported that the passengers voted whether to rush the hijackers. Elizabeth Wenyo called her stepmother at 9:53 and concluded 4.5 minutes later by saying, "I have to go. They're breaking into the cockpit." Sandra Bradshaw on the phone with her husband said, "Everyone is running up to first class. I've got to go." The revolt on Flight 93 began at 9:57. The hijackers in the cockpit became aware of the revolt seconds later. Amidst the sounds of the passenger counterattack, the aircraft plowed into an empty field in Stony Creek, Pennsylvania. Flight 93 intended target remains a mystery. From inside the North Tower, horrific stories will emerge. Tom McGuinness, a trader, was attending a special meeting on the 97th floor when Flight 11 crashes into the tower. There was a huge explosion. Around him, walls collapsed. Smoke started filling his office. Through the window, he could see people falling or jumping from the floors above. Mr. McGuinness surveys the damage around him and realizes he was trapped. There was no way out. He called his wife Liliana, the mother of 4-year-old daughter Caitlin. It was 10:26. The fire raged on the west side of the 92nd floor. The phone lines cut. Tom McGuinness will not survive. From the moment Flight 11 hit the North Tower, evacuation proceeded efficiently. The elevators were all rendered unusable. However, the 3 stairways survived. The 102 minutes between the impact and collapse allowed the vast majority of the workers below the impact zone to escape the building safely. No one on the 91st floor or above is believed to have survived. It is estimated that approximately 1,300 people on these floors perished. No one knows how many survived the initial crash. No one knows how many survived the horrific fire and toxic smoke. In the upper level, many are forced to break windows to get a gasp of fresh air. The light northerly wind, the north corner of the room, and helicopter rescue should have been possible. However, the plane had all the doors to the roof of the tower locked. During the 1993 bomb, 28 people were rescued from the roof by helicopter. Shortly after the South Tower collapse, a police helicopter radioed a warning for firefighters to evacuate the north. Unfortunately, most of the firefighters' radios did not work inside the towers. Very few heard that order. 121 firefighters were killed when the tower collapsed. When the dust started to clear, Lower Manhattan was mostly empty. People had fled. News cameras captured images of one shirtless, lonely man wandering aimlessly. His name is Les Sweeting.
That was looking for my wife. We were in the building when it hit. My wife and daughter. Right all the way down. Oh, to Jersey? Yes. All the way down at the end of the park.
Is your name Gary?
No, my name's Sweetie. I've lost my wife and daughter. We were in the building when it hit. I saw the second plane go into the second building.
Everyone's down this way, so maybe they're down there.
Well, I've just come from around there. I've walked around. Thank you anyway.
Les Sweeting was holidaying in New York with his wife and daughter. They were all in their hotel room in the World Trade Center complex, getting ready when the first plane hit. Debris flows past the window. Les, still getting ready, his wife to go ahead. He will join them in a minute. In the confusion following the first tower collapse, Christine and her daughter Nicola run towards Battery Park. They took a ferry to Staten Island, not knowing where Les was. Les spent hours searching for them among the choking streets. Later, he took a ferry to New Jersey. There, he found refuge in a Red Cross shelter. Christine spent the night watching television coverage, searching every face for a sign of Les. The next afternoon, they are all reunited. Les Sweeting never spoke about what he'd seen. He will die suddenly in September 2006. Around 50 men and women died in what will be known as Hotel 9/11. Soon after the tower had crumbled, hundreds of dazed firefighters were on the scene. Many were crying, others sitting on piles of debris, were trying to come to terms with what had just happened. The collapse of the towers took an incredible toll on the first responders. According to the 9/11 Commission report, the New York Fire Department suffered 343 fatalities, the largest loss of life of any emergency response agency in history. The Port Authority Police Department suffered 37 losses. The New York Police Department lost 23 officers. Among the casualties were a number of senior staff, including the FDNY Chief of Department and the Port Authority Police Superintendent. Incredibly, 12 firefighters, 1 PAPD officer and 3 civilians who were descending stairwell B of the North Tower survived its collapse. Lieutenant Mickey Cross, a firefighter at the East 29th Street Station, is one of the lucky 12. Cross lost many friends on that tragic morning. Like almost all the other firefighters in New York that day, Mickey Cross responded to the emergency at the World Trade Center. He was just east of the South Tower when he heard a tremendous explosion. From where he was, he could not see what just happened. It was the second plane hitting the other tower. He entered the building and started to head up. As he made his way up stairway B, workers were making their way down, making progress difficult. Then the building started to shake. Cross didn't know what was happening. He would later learn the shaking was caused by the South Tower collapse. As evacuation orders were given in the North Tower, Cross started to descend. Somewhere around the 18th or 19th floor, Cross joined 6 men from ladder 6 in their quest to save a woman, Josephine Harris, who had a problem walking. Slowly they made their way down. Then, suddenly, Cross heard a tremendous roar coming from above. The North Tower was coming down. Cross, the men from ladder 6 and Josephine Harris were buried under all but 5 stories of that building. All are alive. All managed to climb their way out of the rubble.
An 10-story building fell down, and I was in the middle of it. And here I am. There's nothing wrong with me. And then I think about all the people that were dying at that moment. You know, friends of mine that were dying at that moment as those buildings were coming down. So this is a very mixed up. I don't have one set of feelings about this. It's very mixed up.
Mickey Cross's next memory was the following Thursday night, when he was going for the beginning of the recovery effort. He had volunteered to go down to work at the World Trade Center. Once on site, as he saw the flame, Cross was wondering why he was going back. As he started working, he felt better. Lieutenant Cross became obsessed with being there. He kept volunteering to go. He officially did 2 months of recovery work before the fire department tells him he could not go anymore. He was busy. Cross's friend, a psychologist, tells him that if he felt better with the site, then he should keep going.
So look at this sense of peace and mind. If I stay away from it too long, I get fidgety. I spent a couple of days away on one island. I couldn't wait to get back. I went supposedly to relax the world. It's going to be an experience in a sense.
Cross will spend months searching for former colleagues. Every time they find a fireman or a cop, everybody stops working and they send a stretcher down, even though what they're feeling is the cops pass one. A flag covers the stretcher. They take their hats off and carry it out. Mickey is now retired from the FDNY and now collaborates with the Memorial Museum Foundation and volunteers his time speaking to the World Trade Center Tribute Center.
Yes.
Only 20 who were trapped in the rubble got out, most within a few hours after the collapses. Tom Canada crawled with another man through 30 feet of twisted steel in the underground shopping mall after the South Tower fell at 9:59 a.m. Escaping just before the North Tower fell, 29 minutes later. Pasquale Basile of Rivervale lost consciousness in a collapsing North Tower stairway. Hours later, he awoke atop the debris and was carried away by a rescue team. 14 others, including Mickey Cross, huddled in that same North Tower stairway. Just after noon, they climbed the stairs to the top of the Ground Zero rubble field. Early in the afternoon, the first bulldozers arrived to begin moving debris. Later, dozens of firefighters began combing through the rubble. But after only half an hour of searching, fears of another collapse forced them to stay away. Officials feared the collapse of 7 World Trade Center, another high-rise burning in the complex, as well as other high-rise buildings bordering the complex. By early evening, 7 World Trade Center finally fell. Port Authority police officer Will Jimeno was cut from the rubble later that evening. Jimeno's partner, Sergeant John McLaughlin, was pulled free just after 7 a.m. on September 12th. Janelle Guzman McMillan will be the last person pulled alive from the wreckage of the World Trade Center. It was just after 12:30 p.m. on September 12th. The towers had fallen 27 hours early. McMillan's head was stuck between 2 pieces of concrete, her legs sandwiched by pieces of the stairway. Her toes had gone numb hours ago. Her right hand was pinned under her leg. Only her left hand was free. The sun rises on the 12th against a curtain of grey soot and smoke. New York was an urban wasteland of deserted streets and crushed vehicles. New Yorkers watched in horror as the World Trade Center complex smoldered. In the afternoon, citizens already traumatized were shaken even more by the rumbling collapse of the remainder of the South Tower. No one was seriously injured, but rescue workers feared for those who could still be alive and trapped in the rubble. Fears of gas leaks and the possibility of asbestos and other toxic substances in the air further complicated the rescue. Exhausted firefighters kept working. 2 cranes lifted wreckage so that the searchers with dogs and sound probes could detect signs of life as firefighters picked through the rubble. In the toxic air, workers had to rinse their eyes every 5 minutes. It was hard work. A cell phone tower had collapsed and landed upright on the ground. Someone climbed the tower and attached an American flag. Everyone stopped and saluted for a second. Volunteers moved debris aside in search of survivors. Every time they turned over a piece of steel, they would find body parts. One rescue worker found 3 bodies in the rooms during 16 hours of work. One was not identified. The second was the cause of death. The third was burned beyond recognition. In the streets around Ground Zero, the coating of dust and ash became an open book. On a red car, someone wrote, "We won't forget," on the windshield. And New York will stand steadfast on the passenger side. Names of missing firefighters were written on building windows. A crushed bus read, "In God we trust." Emergency crews worked tirelessly, unaware they were putting their lives at risk on many levels. The pile of debris was unstable and dangerous. In the air, invisible particles were floating. Police officer Richard Volpe and his partner John Walcott arrived at Ground Zero shortly after the tower's collapse. They searched the world for survivors the first few days as part of the bucket brigade, wearing only surgical protection. They spent the next 7 months recovering body fragments, volunteering on days off. They felt so strongly about the mission that they braved the conditions even as they began coughing up blood. According to a 2006 report, 70% of 9/11 first responders have debilitating respiratory illnesses. Many of them have been ill for years and will be for the rest of their lives.
Well, I think from the beginning, I think the actual site could have been secured a lot better. I don't hear that I know of any illnesses from the site in Washington. I mean, they sealed the whole site off. Everybody that was in there had proper respirators and they had the Tyvek suits. And it seems like nobody got sick there. Here in the World Trade Center, where the toxins were probably 1 billion times worse than there, they didn't take any of those preventions to help the people that were here.
Volpe now suffers from kidney failure and respiratory problems. Together with his partner, John Walker, they started a class action to try to get compensation for the health problems they'd suffered as a result of being involved with the rescue operation. They won the case late 2010. In early 2011, President Obama signed the 9/11 Health Act, providing first responders with health care.
And even if the city wasn't negligent, these people got sick because they weren't given respirators, and it's no one's fault. How do you not compensate firemen and cops, construction workers who went down there to help America and were sick and dying today, especially when it's a party that says so for that purpose?
March Marty wasn't supposed to be on the 104th floor that morning. He'd been put in charge of the new Cantor Fitzgerald office on the Jersey Shore. It was supposed to have opened in July, but that got pushed back to Labor Day, then pushed back again. The remains of Marty were never found. His mother and sisters are unable to move on without clinical confirmation.
My sister and I had gone and bought flowers, and I was just like, where do I put them? Where do we take them? And it's just you're telling me he's gone, but where is he? Where did he go? Where did he go that you can't even find?
For Americans, understanding what happened proved difficult. (2,832) were killed in New York, 125 more in Washington. The World Trade Center for 69 days, emitting more than 200 different chemicals. (291 bodies were discovered intact in the rubble. (90,500 body parts were collected. Only 1,102 victims were identified. 1,616 families were issued a death certificate without a body to bury. More than 3,000 children lost to hunger. Their average age was 8. In New York, first responders are still dying today as a result to exposure to harmful chemicals. The financial cost is estimated at more than $11 trillion. The emotional cost cannot be Martin Wojcicki touched a lot. People such as Jeffrey Larry Broom. Martin always made sure to visit them. He spent time with their 7-year-old son Tyler, teaching him the basics of baseball. When the Brewers learned that Martin had done it, they told their son Tyler. Tyler cried. Not fully understanding, Tyler committed to Martin to say for being his friend. Someday, maybe Tyler will understand what happened that day. Someday,
This has become the defining moment of the 21st century, and these images are among the most famous and shocking ever taken. But at the time, no one realized that a second phase of the tragedy would soon happen. The complete collapse of the towers. 6,818 people died. In a documentary first broadcast last December, many of the reasons for the collapse were uncovered. But since then, disturbing evidence has come to light.
I think the building was a test tube for a lot of reasons.
It's very tough. It deepens the tragedy of that day. Some of the elements couldn't have been different. We could have something like it.
This isn't just aesthetic. This is designed to protect people's lives. While no one doubts the blame for the tragedy lies squarely with the terrorists who caused it, now seems that at least some of the loss of life could have been prevented before one of the world's premier buildings was reduced to this. The steel skeleton of the two gigantic towers began arriving in this New Jersey scrapyard. As each piece was brought from Lower Manhattan, each gravity machine struggled to cope with lumps of metal that weighed over twice as much as the trucks used to transport them. The very ground shook as they fell just a few feet. Within weeks, thousands of tons of high-strength steel lay in massive, twisted heaps. Most of the steel was quickly cut up and exported to the Far East, sold for $120 per ton. And these days, the yard stands almost empty, which for many of the relatives of those who perished is a cause for concern.
We want to know why the buildings collapsed, why they collapsed, how they collapsed, and we want to make sure that this never happens again. And we really don't know how we can ascertain that with most of the evidence lost.
Sally Reaganhood lost her son Christian, a probationary fireman who had just finished his training, while Rich Gabrielle worked for an insurance company in the South Tower. Injured, he was unable to escape before the building collapsed.
The legacy that we will leave for our loved ones is the changes that we're going to make. Never again will buildings like this be built if we can help it.
What's left of the towers will form the basis of an official investigation, although it's not clear how complete such a study could be. This was the largest structural failure ever witnessed, and the hope is that lessons can be learned for the future. The structural engineer who built the towers has his office here in Lower Manhattan. It used to have a commanding view of the complex, but now it overlooks what has come to be known as Ground Zero.
The responsibility for arriving, if you will, at the ultimate strength of the tower was mine. And the fact that they didn't stand longer could be laid at my feet. Do I feel guilty about it? About the fact that they collapsed? The circumstances on the 11th of September were outside of that which we considered in the design. Today, if I knew
they would have stood longer, of course. Leslie Robinson was just 34 years old when he started work on a project with many woods, cutting-edge technology applied on an enormous scale. The towers were not being skyscrapers. They were to be innovative in almost every way. They would have more office space than the entire city of Liverpool, taller than anything ever built. Conceived in the optimistic, forward-looking 1960s as the perfect solution to a problem that badly affected New York, inner city established for decay. It's a classic American response to a problem, which is hit with as much firepower as we do. It was just whammo, the two skyscrapers in the world, clearing away blocks of lower Manhattan. Well, that's acceptable. That's how we thought. Back then, the man in charge was Dr. Zilli, who 31 years later saw the towers fall as he drove to work. It just never occurred to me. They had stood there since 1907. Oh, it just didn't seem possible. I remember I cried, sitting in the car. In happier times, Mr. T, as he was known to his staff, was in charge of what the Reader's Digest called the biggest building project since the pyramids. My job was to make a program which the architects would follow. How many feet of office space, how many feet of consumer service area, a place for customers, a hotel, and find the architectural team that can carry it out. The architect was being Nori Yamasaki, or Yang as he was known, a Japanese American who died in 1986. He conceived of repaired 80-story towers sprouting out of the concept. But even these giants would not have enough office space for Mr. T. I said, well, does it meet our program? No, he said, it's not. It's 2 million square feet short. I said, why is that? He said, you can't build a building 84. And I said, why? Well, he said, because the elevator in buildings cooler than 84 make it impossible to be rentable. The problem was that with a building of 80 stories tall, so much more, so for the elevators needed to service the upper floors. But this little problem wasn't going to stop Guyver's own. I remember saying to President Kennedy is not going to be on. I think he could go back to talk to him. The problem was solved by treating each third of the skyscraper as a separate 40-story building, so fewer elevator shafts would be needed. Repeated 3 times, this system was then linked together with 2 express elevators that were the ones that would build the whole height of the building. If you went to an upper floor of the World Trade Center, you didn't get in the elevator at the ground floor and go to the floor. You got into a big, giant elevator to what was called a sky lobby, and there you switched from a local elevator to your individual floor. That's what they did, and that's how the buildings happened. It was now economically viable to construct towers so tall they would face a new challenge: the winds that can sometimes reach hurricane force in New York City. Dealing with gales such as these required yet more innovation. Most skyscrapers are built on steel or concrete frames, which is a grid of columns and beams that goes all the way through the building. The World Trade Center was different. It was what engineers call a tube structure. It was a very,
very strong mesh of steel that surrounded the exterior.
The way in which the walls were built was equally ingenious. 3 30-foot-long columns were welded together off-site to make a relatively lightweight yet rigid prefabricated panel. This was then hoisted up to join thousands of similar pieces, forming a square tube of metal. In the middle stood a central core containing all the stairwells and elevator shafts, and giving the towers one of their major selling points, large open floor spaces of nearly an acre each.
Tenants like open space. It's flexible. It allows them to have big open rooms if they want, or to put temporary partitions anywhere they please.
There was another advantage to this system. It would save money.
You could do a tube structure with roughly half the amount of steel than you would need for a conventional frame that goes all the way through the structure, but it would hold up just as well and would be just as strong.
The construction progressed at an amazing rate, 3 floors every 2 weeks. Steel came from all over America and beyond, arriving just in time to be hoisted to its new home in the sky. The pressure to get the job done was enormous, and supervising it all, extremely busy Guy Tozzoli.
Well, the first thing I did is I scheduled meetings in 17 minutes. That was the maximum you could have one on. And I took it religiously that way. And you got an answer. That was very important because if we made stuff, it had to be done on time.
The final job was to place a 350-ton TV antenna on the top of the North Tower, taking its total height to 119 feet, which made it, for a brief while, the tallest building on Earth.
Get it up.
The Twin Towers, as they quickly became known, now soared above the New York skyline, becoming one of the most famous structures in the world. An instantly recognizable symbol of America itself, a demonstration of high technology coupled with breathtaking ambition. To begin with, it proved difficult to find enough tenants to occupy the huge amount of space the building offered, but gradually the floors filled up, and 23 years passed uneventfully, save for the odd small office fire or jammed elevator. Such high towers made for an exceptional viewing platform, and they were a firm favorite with the tourists.
It's hard to be down when you're up on top of the world. But come on up, take a good look around at the fun at the top of the world.
The observation deck at the top of the World Trade Center. If you think the view from inside is spectacular, wait till you get outside to the roof. It's breathtaking. On February the 26th, 1993, the first terrorist attack took place. A hired van packed with hydrogen canisters and the equivalent of half a ton of TNT was driven into the underground car park beneath the complex. Although there was no vehicle access actually inside the towers themselves, the bombers got as close as they could, parking the van 2 floors down, 6 feet from the subterranean south wall of the North Tower. At 18 minutes past 12, the van exploded. injured in what was, at that time, the biggest terrorist attack ever carried out on American soil. The towers acted like giant chimneys, sucking smoke from the blast upwards through the stairwells and elevator shafts, which were full of people trying to get out. The intention had been to demolish the base of the North Tower and cause it to fall into the south. But the terrorists had not reckoned with the extraordinary strength of the triple steel.
The bomb was a serious bomb, but in terms of the building of the scale of the World Trade Center, it was not a significant event in terms of the tower. Now, outside of the tower, it was another matter completely.
The bomb failed to demolish the towers because it exploded outside of the tube. The blast merely bouncing off and shattering several floors of car park and the machinery space below that. The next time the terrorists attacked would be different because 8 years later, they finally managed to penetrate towers' defenses. British-born naval architect George Slay was on the 91st floor of the North Tower at 8:46 a.m.
I was on the phone, I heard a roar, looked out the window and saw this passenger jet coming towards the building. It was only about 2 or 3 plane lengths away from me at that point. And I didn't really have time to react. It was just, I saw it and then it was into the building.
George's office was just feet below the point at which nearly 200 tons of Boeing 767 had struck the tower.
Our offices are between the 2 arrowheads, and my office was particularly to the first 3 windows to the right of this arrowhead. This area here. It doesn't get much closer than that. My office kind of collapsed around me. One of my colleagues came rushing along to see if I was okay and offered to drag me out. I politely refused and said I was okay and crawled up myself.
At 6 minutes past 9, as onlookers watched in horror, the second plane hit. Watching from the window overlooking the complex was the engineer Leslie Robertson's wife, Saltine C., who is also a structural engineer with the firm.
Well, after the first tower was hit, all of us were gathered around the windows on the north side looking towards the North Tower, which was burning. And I was standing by this window with lots of other people from the office when we saw the blue and red plane coming by and smash into the South Tower. And people thought it was a movie. You know, it was unreal. We were so stunned. Nobody believed that this was for real.
In the time that has passed since that appalling day, the complete set of plans and drawings that are kept in this office has been under intense scrutiny. These documents graphically illustrate why many in the building would not escape.
These are the architectural drawings of the World Trade Center North Tower, Tower A. And this is the 94th floor, which is very close to the floors of impact on the North Tower. And the plane came from the north side, so broadside onto the core. The core is from here to here, and there to there.
If an outline of a Boeing 767 is superimposed on the plans, the true scale of the impact becomes all too clear. The central core's walls were made of a lightweight board called sheetrock, which could offer little protection into the vital stairwells and elevator shafts it contained.
I think talking to some of the other people in our office, when we first went into the stairwell, the people who investigated the stairwells looked up, and you could see that the stairwells were blocked above us. It seemed to be there's a lot of debris, and there was nobody coming down the floors above us.
Going for.
Many of the elevator
That's
shafts
scary
were
to hear
also
that we talking like this. I got a whole lot of problem. Whole video complaining. Then you complaining what the problem. They're making all kind of noises.
Flying down.
For you to even solve your problem, no.
And then you can hear the wind, like a wind tunnel. But a lot of the elevators came crashing down. Doors flat right open on the other side of the wall.
Standing in the lobby, Kelly witnessed the destruction of the very system that had made the buildings possible in the first place.
One of them flew open, and then people started coming out that elevator. And they had their hair was on fire. You could see the smoke coming off their jackets and everything. And they just kept on running. Once they got out of the everybody just kept on running.
In the North Tower, 1,360 people died above the point of impact. No one escaped through the damaged zone.
It's really tragic, when somebody loses a colleague, a husband, a son, or whatever, to explain to them that they died because of defects that we knew about before the incident.
Jake Pauls is an expert on escape from high-rise buildings. He studied the towers after the bomb in '93 and believes that the stairwell design was misconceived.
One thing we see is the stairs are very tightly clustered together relative, for example, to the diagonal dimension. There's a traditional rule that says that the stairs should be at least half or a third of the diagonal apart. And we can see here they're actually much too close. This was a poor design in terms of the layout of the stairs because there wasn't enough redundancy. For example, so if an incident affects one stair, blocks one stair, it's very likely to affect the other stairs.
Message received September 11th at 8:59 a.m.
Hey, Beverly, this is Sean. In case you get this message, there's been an explosion in World Trade 1. That's the other building. It looks like a plane struck it on fire at about the 90th floor. And it's horrible.
Forget that. We don't want to do anything about that.
Sean entered the 90th floor of the South Tower. Before the second plane struck, he had already begun to leave, but was told to go back to his desk.
When the plane hit the first building, the manager of his floor began an immediate evacuation. They headed for what I've since learned would have been staircase C. And at some point in that process, an announcement came telling them that the building was secure and that they should go back to their offices.
No one knew a second plane was about to hit, and when it did, one chance to escape had already been missed. Half an hour later, Beverly spoke to her husband on the phone.
And he said, "Well, we're trapped. We tried to go down. We got as far as I think he said 79, and he said that we couldn't get down any further. So we tried to go up, and he said the doors are locked."
Many believed that they could be rescued from above by helicopter, but in fact, heavy smoke and obstructions on the roof made it impossible.
Sometime after the 93 bombings, they had cluttered the rooftops with all kinds of equipments and barriers purposely to prevent helicopters from landing on the buildings. And they never told the people who worked there.
In fact, one stairwell, Stairwell A, did remain open in the South Tower. It ran outside the central core to bypass some heavy machinery. Trying to get to the roof had wasted precious time that could have been spent finding the way out.
So, like with that situation, they were working with misinformation. They would have looked for another staircase. There's no doubt in my mind that they would have said, okay, where are the other staircases located? And we've got to find them and we've got to get out. And it turns out that staircase A in that building was clear.
Only 18 people found the escape route. Sean Eckert died along with 600 others in the South Tower. It now seems that at least some of those lives could have been saved.
Stop that. They're taking it.
As the awful sight was beamed around the world, it seemed incredible that the buildings could stand at all. The truth was that designers had considered just such a dreadful possibility. Taking as an example the Boeing 707 passenger jet.
The airplane we were envisioning was the largest airplane of its time. Flying slowly and low, lost in the fog. And in any event, we designed the buildings to take the impact of the Boeing 707 hitting the building at any location.
The Boeing 767 is similar in size to the 707, but the hijacked planes were not traveling slowly. They were near to their maximum speed.
The energy contained in an airplane or any other moving object is proportional to the square of the velocity. Double the velocity, you have 4 times the energy. And so the energy imposed on the building by the 767 was very substantially more than the energy that we had assumed in design.
The fact that the building stood tall is a testament to their extraordinary strength. But both were now severely damaged, and in very different ways. In the North Tower, the plane punched its way through approximately 36 of the exterior columns. But it was the core that absorbed the brunt of the energy from the attack. The South Tower was even worse off, since it had been struck lower down and across one corner. This meant that not only was there more weight above the damaged area, putting it under much more stress, but also, because the damage was off-center, the upper section was now trying to lean to one side. The next phase of the tragedy would unpick what little strength was left.
These were the biggest buildings in New York City. Each floor was one acre in area. And we're looking at this and we see smoke issuing under pressure for at least the top 20 floors, maybe more. So if you're looking at it, if we're using the 24 figure, you're looking at 20 acres of fire.
Although an aircraft impact had been imagined, it seems no one had calculated the effects of fuel on the structure.
To the best of my knowledge, the considerations of the fuel in the airplane in terms of an explosion or a great fire was not considered. Now, we were not responsible for that aspect of the design, so I'm wrong, but I believe it was not considered, and further, I believe that had it been considered, it would have been proven to be impossible to deal with it.
Simulations show that the initial fireballs consumed only a fraction of the 10,000 gallons of kerosene fuel each aircraft carried, leaving a substantial quantity to start fires throughout the building. Kerosene burns very quickly, and within about 10 minutes, the flames were being sustained by the normal contents of the buildings. By analyzing the size and speed of the smoke plume, seen here from 250 miles up in space, It was deduced that each fire generated the same energy as a meteor. Down below, hundreds of firefighters arrived to the scene, although in reality, the sheer scale of the towers meant there was very little they could do.
A typical firefighting hose team can extinguish approximately 2,500 square feet. That's an area 25 by 100. If you get two tack hose lines side by side, they may be able to extinguish about 5,000 square feet of fire. The World Trade Center floor areas were 40,000 square feet. They're building these high-rise office buildings with open floor design and creating space almost 10 times more than the area we can extinguish with hose streams.
The way in which steel frame buildings behave in fires depends on their construction. In this test, done by British Steel in 1995, a large amount of typical office furniture was burnt to see what would happen to the heavy steel beams that supported the ceiling.
When steel is bare, when it heats up, it gets weaker. It's not that it melts in a fire. In fact, normal fires are not hot enough to melt steel. Even if you were, for example, to use an unusual fuel like kerosene, you cannot achieve temperatures hot enough to melt steel. But what happens is it starts to lose its strength. And as it loses its strength, it starts to sag. It becomes softer and sags and can no longer support the load.
This was the largest test of its type ever carried out, and it showed how unprotected steel can be distorted even by a normal office fire. But as is usual in steel buildings, the structural beams only slowly and progressively warped and sagged. There was no chance of a sudden collapse.
In over 20 years, I have not seen, until recently, a protected steel structure that has collapsed in a fire.
So what was the cause of the devastating explosive failure that happened at the World Trade Center? How did such a massively strong steel building suddenly give way and come crashing down to earth?
Everyone else, because totally out of your capacity to digest it and absorb it. I was shocked as anyone else.
Professor Hassan Astonay was one of the few scientists to have examined the steel in the New Jersey yard before it was sold abroad for scrap. Here, amongst the ruins, he studied the columns in an attempt to discover what the collapse mechanism could have been. There were several clues that immediately pointed to a very specific and unusual scenario.
What you say here is actually very critical, very, very important. Perhaps this is the most important piece I have found so far. This piece comes from most likely Tower 2, where the plane went in and exploded. This is the side face of back columns. So plane went in, exploded right here, and the explosion hit this surface. What you see here is, first of all, a bend that is due to explosion, but more importantly, this is the signature of explosion. This has happened due to explosive material hitting this column and making that bulge. So this is the floor where explosion happened. And the windows are blown away, everything is burned, even fireproofing on this floor is burned and glazed to the steel.
The fireproofing in the World Trade Center was sprayed on, a dry, fragile material made of mineral fibers.
Like anything else,
Designed to protect the steel from heat, it played a crucial role in the durability of the structure. but there is evidence that at least in some areas it failed to do its job.
So this piece, as you can see, has been burned. You can see the smoke and the fire effect on it. You can see some fireproofing, but really not much of it is left. So you can see that when the building was burning, there was no fireproofing left.
Any lack of fireproofing would have meant that the steel was extremely vulnerable to the heat from the fires. And it seems that in the South Tower particularly, this may have had a disastrous effect on the support for the massive open-plan floors. At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Professor Eduardo Castle has been carrying out research into the disaster.
It is always easy to play the general after the war. However, it is important to understand why it is that the structures fell. And if the structures did have an Achilles heel, I believe that this Achilles heel were the floors.
The floor system was unusual for a high-rise building. Instead of the big steel beams that are normally used, the floors were supported with lightweight structures called trusses. A steel deck was placed over them to form prefabricated panels, which were then hoisted into position. They were fastened at each end to brackets welded to the wall, and once in place, each floor was covered with a 4-inch layer of concrete. This system was one of the reasons the towers could be built so quickly, since each floor was largely pre-assembled down on the ground. But the drawback with such lightweight trusses is that they can be very susceptible to fire.
There is no other construction technique that has killed more firefighters than trusses. We have a saying in the fire service: don't trust the truss. They fail during fire.
A truss's strength depends on each and every beam and bar it contains. Damage even a small part of it, and the whole system fails.
Here we have a model of the floor system with the floors and the beams, the trusses. This system is very strong, it's very light, very stiff, but it is also very susceptible to fire. And therefore it has to be fireproof very well and appropriately. To demonstrate this, I have here a similar floor system that has been fireproof everywhere except at these 2 locations here. And we will see what effect these elements can have on the behavior of the structure.
First, the load on the floor is simulated with metal weights, and then the system is heated up with a gas burner. Almost immediately, the unprotected elements fail, compromising the strength of the entire unit.
This demonstrates that the structure is only as strong as the weakest link. This element that fails, even if it is only slightly exposed, is the one that determines how strong the structure will be.
Even though most of the truss remains as strong as ever, the failed section pulls inwards, putting enormous loads on the connections at each end, which, if not properly protected, would also be weakened by the fire. A theory reinforced by the findings made in the scrapyard.
You cannot bend the steel like this without cracking it, unless you warm it up. So what this piece tells me is that this piece was very hot when the floor collapsed and fainted. So that must have been the initiation of collapse of this World Trade Center tower.
So what happened to the fireproofing? Why, as appears, was it so ineffectual? It's been speculated that the blast from the impacts must have removed it, but there is another explanation, one that suggests that maybe the towers should have stood for longer than they did. The fireproofing had actually had a rather checkered history. In 1995, a bitter court case took place about asbestos in the spray-on material, and consultant architect Roger Morse was asked to examine it. What he found greatly disturbed him.
The fireproofing on the tenant floors, on the trusses, was missing in many locations. It was thin in virtually all locations. The fireproofing on the columns in the core was falling off of the columns in story-high sheets.
If Aaron Gordon's diss track had been... These photographs, taken in the mid-90s, show the state of the fire protection in at least some of the building. Few places show a 1.5-inch thick coating, the amount required to adequately safeguard the steel.
You can see that the fireproofing is missing from the diagonal. This is the diagonal that's going to the end point where the truss is sitting on the outside column.
Although he only examined the lower floors of the North Tower, Roger Morse's photos show that at the time the building was less than comprehensively protected. Many of the vital connections on which the floors depended were almost bare.
If this were the proper thickness of fireproofing, this would be an amorphous blob of fireproofing material. The space behind this angle seat would be completely filled with fireproofing. I don't know what happened. The applicator didn't install it properly. It wasn't inspected properly. Somehow or another, the fireproofing guy was allowed to take a pass on this, which is really quite an outrageous thing when you consider the importance of what's going on.
In the central core, the reason the column's protection was in such bad condition was easier to explain.
What had happened was that the fireproofing was applied to loose rust that hadn't been cleaned off the steel at the time the fireproofing was applied. So the fireproofing was stuck just fine to the rust, but the rust was coming loose from the steel, so the fireproofing would fall off with it.
Those responsible have stated that the maintenance of the fireproofing was an ongoing headache, but that the buildings were safe. The floor trusses at the impact point of the North Tower had been refurbished in the last few years of the building's life, but they had only got as far as recoating one of the impacted floors in the South Tower. They also contend that the impacts were so severe and the damage so great that the collapse was inevitable. This view is disputed by Roger Morse.
The fireproofing had been in good condition if it had been installed properly and had been maintained properly. Then the buildings certainly would have survived longer. It may even have survived altogether. May never have collapsed.
Whatever the true performance of the fireproofing, the last phase of the destruction was now underway, for the design meant that with large parts of the floors removed, the entire tower would fall. Again, the principle is easy to demonstrate.
Here we have two models. These two structures are identical, except that this one here is missing an intermediate floor. And we shall see what effect this floor has on the way that the structures carry weights. We're going to be loading first the structure on this side. The important thing to keep in mind is that these loads are transferred through the columns to the table, and that this intermediate floor carries none of this load. All it does, this floor, is it ties the columns together, and it provides stability to the columns.
The model on the left is easily able to take a very large load.
And I could add more weight than here. Perfectly stable. Let's begin removing weights and adding them onto the structure on the other side.
If the one with the missing floor is tried, it cannot support nearly as much. Without the stabilizing effect of the floor, its columns twist and buckle, and it collapses. The South Tower burned for 56 minutes before it fell. Its less adequately fireproofed floor trusses, unable to brace the vertical columns and keep them from buckling under the immense gravitational load.
Jason and I went out one day. We came back home, and she had rearranged the living room, the couch, love seat, and table. We came in, walked into my kitchen, and she had put utensils, glasses from the cabinet into a different cabinet. I was on the train now.
While Lower Manhattan was smothered in a filthy, choking dust, the fire continued to eat away at the strength of the North Tower.
She says that I'm controlling, and that's evil. Kathy gets old, she's crazy on me.
It had stood for longer because it had been hit square on, and so could better redistribute the loads. It also had less weight above the point of impact, and its floor trusses were better protected. But the fire would seek out the weakest part nevertheless, and this time the core columns would give way first. Once the top of the building had fallen just the height of a single story, its vast momentum smashed each floor in turn, until all 500,000 tons of steel hit the ground at 120 miles per hour.
I don't understand. I've been on backwards. I've tried. Everything I say is wrong.
You can't figure out anything you're doing that's wrong. You had to do something. I mean, we just said,
how would you want to spend your final days?
Ours was once a symbol of prosperity and optimism, built when America had little fear of terrorist attack. It now seems as if they will be remembered for a very different reason.
This building, the way it was constructed, was innovative, but it nevertheless resulted in the most catastrophic building collapse there has ever been. But I just hope that my husband's death is not needless, that lessons are learned from this event, and that things change.
Masha eventually recovered, only to be exiled to Siberia for apparently concealing an illness from the Tsar's advisors. An investigation later concluded she'd been poisoned by the Saltykovs, who were dismissed from court. But the whole affair put Michael off any thought of marriage for many years. When Tsar Michael turned 28, his relatives began to worry. Without an heir, the future of the dynasty was in doubt. Once more, his mother had a candidate. This time, reluctantly, Michael agreed to the match and was married to Princess Maria Dolgorukova. But 4 months later, Maria fell sick and died, the cause never fully established. Dismissed his mother from any involvement in his marital affairs, and instead arranged for the traditional election of a Russian royal bride. The advice he received was to watch the girls carefully from afar, praising their age, complexion, eyes, and hair. Look for illness and ensure she's healthy in mind and kind by nature. The tradition of electing a Tsar's bride was essentially a beauty contest, involving thousands of candidates from noble families. First, royal officials sorted applicants on the basis of their height, size of head, and size of feet. Then, senior nobles and court doctors inspected the girls in the capital. Finally, 10 to 20 of the most beautiful girls were brought to the court, where they were introduced to the Tsar in person. When Michael announced his decision, his advisors were speechless. He chose Evdokia Streshneva as his queen. She hadn't even been in the contest. She was the maid of one of the candidates and the daughter of a poor nobleman. From bitter experience, the Tsar decided to handle all the arrangements himself. The identity of his bride was kept a closely guarded secret, and she was brought to the palace just 3 days before the wedding. Tsaritsa Evdokia, the Russian Cinderella, proved to be kind, considerate, and loving. She bore Michael 10 children, though only 4 survived infancy, 3 daughters and a son, Alexei. It was enough to ensure the dynasty would live on. Michael and the land were at peace for a short while. Michael was determined to reclaim Russian lands lost during the time of troubles. It would mean war with Poland. First, he reorganized the army, introducing new weapons and equipment based on developments in Europe. In particular, Michael learned from the Swedish army, the strongest in Europe. New regiments were formed with 8 companies of 200 men. Each had 120 musketeers and 80 pikemen. New muskets were bought, which weighed 4 kilograms instead of 6, so they could be fired without a support. By 1632, 10 new regiments had been formed, with a strength of 17,000 men. It was one thing to create a new army. It was another to teach it how to win on the battlefield. Russian forces were defeated outside Smolensk, and after 2 years of war, both sides sought a settlement. The 1634 Treaty of Polyanovka brought no territorial gains for Russia apart from the town of Sierpiesk, ceded by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Russia also paid an indemnity of 20,000 rubles, in exchange for which King Vladislav of Poland renounced his claim to the Russian throne. Russia itself was gradually becoming a more prosperous society. Thanks to Michael's efforts, English and Dutch specialists came to Russia to share their expertise. They lived in the foreign districts of the big cities, such as Moscow's famous German Quarter, and invested capital in local enterprises. Russians referred to the Germans, or often any foreigner, as Niemets, from the Russian word Nemoy, meaning mute, because they couldn't speak Russian. In the 10th year of his reign, Tsar Michael invited English geologists to investigate iron and copper ore deposits in the Ural Mountains. 8 years later, the first state steelmaking plant was opened in the region. 12 years after that, a Dutch entrepreneur built an armory at Tula, 100 miles south of Moscow, that's still in operation today. Russia soon began to export arms to some of the most developed countries in Europe. The average wage at this time was 3 kopecks a day, for which one could buy 3 chickens, or 45 eggs, or 1.5 kilos of salmon. A sheepskin coat cost 50 kopecks, or about 2 weeks' wages. A pair of boots was 10 days' wages, while a cow cost 2 rubles, or about 2 months' wages. Abroad, Russian state was gaining greater influence. In 1625, Shah Abbas, the ruler of Persia, sought to win favor by sending the Patriarch of Russia, Holy Rome. This sacred relic was believed to be the one worn by Christ before his crucifixion, later taken by one of the Roman soldiers present. Patriarch Philaret, the Tsar's father, ordained a week's fasting to mark its arrival before presenting the holy robe to the sick. 67 people were said to have been miraculously cured in the first 6 months alone.
I know when you see white people, where you can be
The robe itself was later placed in a cathedral within the Kremlin. Today, a part of the robe can be seen in the Cathedral of Christ the Savior in Moscow.
You just sit down there, you're looking at you doing
After the barbarism of the time of troubles, Romanov sought to nurture cultural revival within Russia. One of Patriarch Philaret's first decrees was to restore the Tsar's once vast library, now largely destroyed.
All the things that you're doing, we saw everything.
Scholars were sent to search for books in distant monasteries and to make
All the
copies
people
of rare
you're
manuscripts
all the
and
people that
return
you've
with them
been
to
talking
Moscow.
to, we know every one of them. When we went to Massa wedding, you were talking about me again.
Just 30 years after the time of troubles, Russia was back to the level of prosperity she'd enjoyed before the state had slid into anarchy. Trade and productivity were on the rise. People had enough to eat and felt safe. It was an age of economic and political stability.
We heard you talking about
Tsar Michael had achieved the impossible and brought the Russian state back from the brink.
You were telling the boys something. You turn it right again.
On July 12, 1645, the Tsar celebrated his 49th birthday.
The white people, they will go
That
tell the
morning
people
after
something.
church, Michael seemed to have a presentiment of his own
And then
approaching death.
you're looking at people saying,
He publicly forgave all those who had ever insulted or
one
sinned
time you
against
were
him,
telling,
and ordered a general amnesty for all prisoners.
You know that we're just watching you were doing
On
that,
coming
and we're
home,
just looking
the
at you.
first Romanov Tsar of Russia said goodbye to his wife and
You're
son,
just doing all kind of things.
and died peacefully later that day.
Trying to tell you to stop the thing you're doing. You won't stop. You're just continuously doing the thing. I know you're stupid or something. You think we don't know what you've been doing? We've been watching. We're watching you very close. The thing
Russia
affected the
mourned
thing.
its
All the
much
things
loved
you've been
ruler
doing
for
over
3
the years.
days.
The thing
Many
causing
thousands from
the
all
thing caused
ranks
a
and
lot of
walks of
problem
life
for
came
us.
to pay their respects before his coffin. Services were held in his honor.
The thing
in all
caused
the
a lot of
churches of
it
the
caused a
land.
lot of problem for us. That's what we're trying to tell you. The thing causing problem for your job, causing problem for everything. You can't even do anything.
Alexei Mikhailovich, Michael's eldest son and heir, was as young as his father had been when he ascended to the throne. But the country he inherited had been utterly transformed.
We saw you doing all kind of
Famine,
things,
civil
all kind of
war,
things
and
you're doing.
destruction no longer
You
stalked
don't
the
even know whether
land.
you've been using
Russia
the town
was now
hall.
stable and prosperous. The new ruler of this reinvigorated state, Tsar Alexei, was handsome,
All kind of things you're
intelligent,
doing. You're
virile,
talking
and
to all kind of
devout.
people. You're
Ahead
carrying my
lay
name
great
all over
victories,
the place. What kind of thing?
bloody
What kind of thing you're
revolts,
doing?
remarkable achievements, and fatal mistakes.
Something happened. You don't even come to
Alexei
me to let me
Mikhailovich
know
was
you. They're
destined to
talking all kind
become
of things.
one of Russia's most controversial rulers. Chapter 2. Alexei I Mikhailovich. The young Tsar was not overawed by his new responsibility. It was a role he'd prepared for since early childhood. His education had begun at the age of 6. After learning the alphabet, he was taught to read using stories from the Bible. The prince's household included 20 stewards, 6 teachers, and 18 musicians, as well as bodyguards, acrobats, and jesters. When Alexei was 7, he was given a set of miniature
White
weapons,
people, you're acting, they kind of
arquebus,
they kind of
a
very
bow and
strange
arrows,
behavior.
swords,
What kind of thing?
armor made in Germany, and musical instruments, maps, and engravings from Western Europe.
We were just looking at you the entire time.
Alexei's chief tutor was a nobleman named Boris Marozov.
The same way we
He encouraged his pupil to broaden his outlook and introduced him to Western culture.
And we're telling you, say you using the time,
Many Europeans were invited to the Tsar's court, including interpreters, diplomats, and scholars.
You know that we were just watching your order.
Alexei's personal doctor, an Englishman named Samuel Collins, admired his patient greatly.
I know you're stupid or something. When something happens, you don't know how to talk to people.
He has fair hair and doesn't shave his beard.
You just go do all kind of things to
He is
somebody.
tall with noble bearing. He can be cruel when angry, but he is mostly kind and gentle. He has an excellent memory and is devout. One could name him among the most kind and wise rulers. But for the cloud of advisors and noblemen who surround him and turn his good intentions to evil. During the first years of his reign, Alexei pursued many passions. Much of his time was spent visiting remote monasteries to perform acts of worship. He also collected rare and exotic birds, kept an elk farm, and experimented with new agricultural techniques. He tried to grow melons, almonds, cotton, and grapes. But without doubt, his greatest love was hunting with his falcons. The Tsar owned no fewer than 3,000 falcons, each of which, it was said, he knew by name. His household included 100 falconers of varied rank, paid between 6 and 60 rubles a year, not including bonuses. All were members of the Department of Secret Affairs, which handled the Tsar's amusements and private business. The head falconer, Afanasy Machushkin, was Alexei's close friend. The upkeep of the mews and hunting stables cost the treasury 75,000 rubles a year, equivalent of about $10 million today.
I can't even do my
On
job.
the road, the Tsar's hunting party was more than half a mile long. First came 300 stewards mounted on richly decorated horses, 3 abreast. They were followed by 300 guardsmen in crimson caftans, 5 abreast. Then 500 armored cavalry, 3 abreast. Next came 40 parade horses in ornately decorated harnesses, followed by the reserve carriage horses, and finally the Tsar himself in his English carriage, accompanied by courtiers and hangers-on, no more than a few dozen. Young Alexei was enjoying himself in a manner worthy of a Tsar. He left affairs of state to his tutor, Boris Marozov. But the nobles, jealous of Marozov's influence, urged the Tsar to marry, since a married man had no need of a tutor. But Marozov was not to be so easily outmaneuvered. When the Tsar expressed his desire to marry, the greatest beauties were brought to him from across Russia. He picked his favorite. When she was brought to him a second time in court clothes, Marozov instructed the servant to tie her headscarf so tightly that the girl quickly fainted. It was declared that the girl had fainting sickness. To conceal this from the Tsar was a crime. Her father was exiled to Siberia, and her family fell from favor. Marozov, an elderly widower, then asked the Tsar to help him pick his own bride, and introduced him to the Myaslavsky sisters. Alexei fell in love with the eldest sister, Maria, and married her, while Marozov married Anna, young enough to be his granddaughter, so strengthening further his ties to Alexei. Alexei's family life proved a source of great joy to him. Maria was 5 years his senior, but she proved a perfect match, an ideal Tsaritsa. They lived together for 20 years and had 13 children. The Tsar's gentle manners earned him the nickname the Most Quiet. But his reign itself would prove anything but. Clouds of war and revolt were gathering.
They go look at the kind of house.
On June 1st, 1648, Alexei and his court were returning to Moscow from the Trinity St. Sergius Monastery. When the procession reached the city gates, they found the way blocked by a huge crowd. The people of the city had come to present a petition to the Tsar, complaining of the excesses of his bureaucrats. But the Tsar refused to speak to them. His guards drove them away and arrested the ringleaders.
The kind of place where we had, then you can't talk that kind of.
The next day, the Tsar was returning from another monastery when he was again met by a huge crowd. They pushed his guards aside, broke through to the Tsar's coach, and seized control of the horses. The 19-year-old Alexei was face to face with his subjects for the first time. Despite being surrounded by an angry mob, he remained calm. He listened to their complaints and promised to stamp out government corruption and to dismiss all bribe takers and embezzlers from office. Top of their list was the Tsar's old tutor, Boris Mazarov. In the course of 2 years, Morozov had amassed a huge personal fortune and made himself the second richest person in Russia. As chief treasurer of the state, he reduced spending by slashing the wages of all bureaucrats. Forcing many to accept bribes to revive. He appointed friends and allies to offices of state, but only after they paid him an enormous bribe. But Morozov's most dangerous policy had been to raise the tax on salt. Salt was the universal food preservative. When its price rose fourfold, everyone was affected, and the poorest were threatened with starvation.
I got things to do myself.
The events that followed were recorded in all the courts of Europe. One account was left by a Dutch traveller to Russia, thought to be a spy. A crowd of people forced their way into the palace courtyard. The guards sided with the people and burst into Morozov's house. They trampled everything underfoot, threw his belongings from the windows, and ransacked the blood. They shouted furiously, "This is our blood!" Morozov himself escaped into one of His Majesty's